Humboldt County Association of Governments meeting for January 15th, 2026, a new year. And with that, we'll call this meeting to order. And can we get a roll call?
Chair Johnson.
Here.
Supervisor Madrone.
Present.
Mayor Sawatsky. Mayor Burgell.
Here.
Mayor White.
Here.
Councilmember Jorgensen.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Kenny.
Here.
Councilmember Orr. PAC Member Arroyo. PAC Member Allstrand.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Thank you.
A lot of mayors. It's great.
And our first item this evening is public comment on non-agenda items. If there is any public comment on items not on the agenda for this evening, this is a time we'll hear them. And I do see a hand for JM.
Good evening, board. Thank you for taking my comment. I just really want to go back to us doing some research and collaborative comparisons for the diesel hybrid buses. I think doing all my research and comparing the efficiency and cost effectiveness, we really are selling our transportation short in our rural area, focusing on electric and hydro buses. So I really think it's important that we do our due diligence with doing the proper homework and analysis to have a fair justification for choosing other buses or, choices over others. I want to also kind of bring in our HCD allocations. I was able to listen into Eureka City Council and their recent discussion, and it's kind of been a backflip from verbiage from their city to now, but it's actually taking on a more realistic tone. And I think every city should be supported with that. So again, I think it's important for this board to check in with our municipalities in some way, shape, or form every year or every other year to listen to them. What are they having troubles with infrastructurally? What are they having any difficulties obtaining that's going to move us forward with the state's current housing allocations and mandates? Because they're all just kind of floating in our own little spheres without a general support. And I think you guys really should be the ones responsible to be that general support for all the cities when it comes to being a voice for us at a bigger level. So when it comes down to talking to HCD, you represent us. So I'd appreciate seeing this board move forward with some kind of facilitation of that and keep it an ongoing process. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't see any other public comment at this time, so we will move to board action items. The first one being election of officers and appointment of a CalCog delegate, and we have a staff report for that.
Yes, thank you, Chair Johnson. So I will be brief. This is our annual activity whereby in HCOG's bylaws we elect the 4 officer positions, or the board elects the 4 officer positions, I should say, and that includes the board chair, the vice chair, the 3rd board member, which rounds out the executive committee, so the executive board member, and lastly, our California Association of Council of Governments delegate, or our CalCog delegate. So the first 3 are relatively straightforward. Of course, the board chair presides over the meetings. The vice chair, fills that role should the board chair be absent. The executive committee member rounds out the executive committee. That's the action body that could take action in between board meetings if deemed necessary in order to keep business going. And if that was ever needed to be done, that action would be reviewed at the subsequent board meeting. Lastly, I will note a little bit on the CalCog delegate. So, of course, our previous delegate was Councilmember Atkins Salazar, who is no longer on the HCOG board. So with that, we will need somebody new. We did send out, as some supplementary information, that little cheat sheet, if you will, which kind of describes a little bit of the position. I do like to note that this position ultimately expects some travel. There are 2 to 3 in-person CalCog board meetings typically each year, in addition to a couple of virtual meetings that they facilitate as well. I will note that HCOG does budget for the travel expenses that would be incurred for the CalCog delegate with that. And lastly, just to provide a little bit of additional note there, that position, that delegate also will work closely with me as the executive director to, really review a lot of the policy things that are going on at the state level. And, the hope and expectation for that position is that is our regional advocate at the state level for a lot of the types of policies that CalCog is reviewing and taking on behalf of state regional entities. So with that, I will hand it back to the board, but we are looking for a motion that provides assignments for all 4 of those positions for this next calendar year. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Is there any questions from board members before we seek nominations? I don't see any, so we would entertain nominations for any of those positions, or if there's some of it's a little more difficult maybe when you include the CalCog delegate in there and the executive board member. The chair and the vice chair are the simpler ones, but the executive committee member, which I have actually held, has a lot of different roles that you don't even think about sometimes. So,
Could I speak?
yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would suggest that it might be good to break it up into 2 motions and have the motion for chair and vice chair, and then check in to see who might be interested in these various positions. So in regards to chair, who's interested in that position? Let's just ask that question. Mr. Chair, are you interested in continuing?
If the board so likes that, I would continue on, yes.
Okay, you've done such a great job. Anybody else? Well, that makes that one easy. And as far as vice chair, I know that Mayor Burgell would like to step up into that position, and I'm willing to step down. I've appreciated my year or so at doing this. It's been easy because Mike makes every meeting pretty much. So, and it's such a great group of people. We work well together. But is anybody else interested in the vice chair position? I would make a motion that we elect for chair Mike, and for vice chair Mayor Burgell. Sorry, Mayor of Fortuna as well. So.
I'll second that.
Okay, well, for the chair and vice chair, we have a motion and a second. We'll call a vote. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Well, that makes that easy. And then if I might continue, Mr. Chair, who's interested in the executive position other than the 2 that we just put into office? Anybody interested in that executive position?
How many meetings
Never happened since I've been
might
here.
it involve?
Like you said, it's an emergency thing typically.
Yeah, as far as I know, the work conducted at HCOG typically doesn't lend itself to need the emergency type meetings that don't get a quorum. So as far as I know, that 3rd executive member has never had to act in that capacity. And one more clarification I will add in there, the executive member and the CalCog delegate don't need to be separate positions either. Councilmember Atkins Salazar completed both of those in her previous assignment. So that could be the same person, these last 2.
I do want to note that the 3rd executive member would also help with executive director reviews and things like that.
So, for instance, when the job was open, Stacy helped with the interview process, et cetera. Yeah.
And for
Yeah,
evaluations.
Yeah.
When we do the annual reviews, the executive member also joins in on that. But as the last time the executive member had to participate in a HCOG business type atmosphere was maybe in 19 or 20, because I was the executive member then, and it was something then. It was the last time I know for a fact. That since then, I don't know.
Okay, I'll give it a go.
Okay, so we've got one volunteer Anybody else?
Is this just for the executive or is this for CalCog and the
Are
executive?
you interested in the combo?
No.
Just the executive? Yeah. Okay. Good clarification. So anybody else interested in the executive position?
Am I too new to,
I don't think there's any rule around that.
and it's traveling, what, 2 to 3 times a year?
Oh, for CalCog, that's different, because we were just talking about the executive position, but are you interested in the executive position, the third member of the board? He
No.
is. He is interested in that.
Yes,
So you're talking about the CalCog
correct.
Yeah.
representative, okay?
This-
And
this
you're
would be-
interested in that.
It'd be a good spot if you're interested.
I don't mean to be leading this, I'm just trying to help the chair and the board along here. Anybody else interested in the CalCog position?
I might be interested if, I'll say mildly interested.
Mildly interested. Well, let's take the easy one. I'll make a motion that we have Councilmember Orr to take the position.
Not or.
Not
Not,
or.
no, I'm sorry. Councilman, I would nominate, I would make a motion to elect you to that position, the executive
Councilmember
position.
Jorgensen.
Councilmember Jorgensen, thank you very much.
I would second that.
Sorry. So, motion and a second, I guess,
For the,
for just the executive position.
yeah. So we have a motion and a second for executive member. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None.
And then while I have the floor, if I still do, I would say we've got 2 members that have expressed interest. I don't know quite how to work that out. It'd be nice if we don't have to go to a vote. From Humboldt.
In many ways, I can see how the mayor of Arcata would be a more appropriate, seeing as how I'm from one of the smallest cities in California.
Yeah, but second incorporated. I mean, come on.
Well, yeah, but I don't know.
That's very
She's
generous.
probably going to be more, accustomed to traveling and so forth. So if she's serious about being interested in, I'd be willing to step down.
Well, that's a,
Good.
it's a big thing. So we appreciate that. We still need to, that's an elected position, right? Not an appointed position?
We elect.
Yeah.
Elected by us.
So I would make the motion to elect Kimberly, Councilmember White, to the CalCog representative for HCOG.
I would second
So we have,
electing Mayor White.
Mayor White, thank you. Well, I'm getting corrected all. So that's why I'm not chair or vice chair anymore, so.
all right. Well, we do have a motion and a second to elect Mayor White, the executive committee member for this HCOG board. So we'll call a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. So we have fulfilled our duties, and I appreciate your willingness to step back when needed and step up when needed. So thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
that. And thank you for facilitating a discussion. Although now you're powerless.
Power of the people, right? All equal, yeah.
So
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
thank you. So at this time, we'll adjourn as the HCOG board and reconvene as the Policy Advisory Committee. And we have one item of business, the consent calendar. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at that. We will be looking to approve the meeting record from December 20th. Would anyone have any questions, comments, corrections? Is there any public comment on the consent calendar? Well, seeing none, we'll close public comment and entertain a motion in a second.
I'll move for approval of consent.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. We'll call a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. So thank you for that. There were no items removed from the consent calendar, so we come to discussion items of the Regional Climate Action Plan update.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Johnson. So this is a follow-up on a number of discussions that have been held at the HCOG board over the last year and a half, I believe. And that is HCOG's potential future role as the coordinating or the housing agency, if you will, housing being the agency where it lives, for the Regional Climate Action Plan, and specifically for the Regional Climate Committee, for the Climate Program Manager, and the general role of coordinating efforts for the RCAP across the county. So, as was brought in front of the PAC in June of last year, staff brought forward an update on this item that included a number of things for the board to consider should this position and this responsibility be deemed necessary to come to HCOG. And that particular discussion included reviewing the potential next steps that would be needed insofar as how this would be brought into the JPA, what types of augmentations or modifications would be needed to the JPA cooperative agreement. This included an updated recommendation that rather than spend HCOG reserve funds to fund a position in a first year, that staff move forward developing a regional funding MOU where local agencies could pay their proportional share for a regional position that could be housed at HCOG. It included a discussion on the composition and the general structure of the Regional Climate Committee, which is an important part of RCAP oversight and compliance. And lastly, some additional discussion on next steps, like, job description for the climate manager position, what a wage and a wage scale may look like, things of that nature. So coming out of that discussion item, staff received direction from the PAC and from the board to continue to move forward and explore HCOG as the home for the RCAP, if you will. And so we've been working both at HCOG and regionally with our local agency partners for the last several months to develop some of the deliverables, I shouldn't say deliverables, I guess, some of the updates and some of the draft materials that are presented as part of the staff report. And I'll go through them one by one briefly. So I'd like to start with the direction we received from the board to get a legal review of our JPA agreement and to start to figure out what the next steps in that process would be like should the HCOG board ultimately vote to take on the RCAP position. And ultimately, we did get some good news from our legal counsel, which is our existing JPA cooperative agreement is sufficiently broad where we could take that role without actually updating the cooperative agreement. That would make things certainly more streamlined. What we could do is ultimately develop and execute a supplementary memorandum of understanding or a cooperative agreement, which could combo as our regional funding MOU, wherein we could secure the funding needed from local agencies to fund the regional position. The one thing I will note is it is pretty clearly called out in HCOG's JPA cooperative agreement that the intent of the agency is to act in an advisory and a planning role. So if the vision for the position was anything beyond that, so acting in similar capacity that the PAC does or the board does or that staff do now, that would require potential consideration and JPA modification. But if the vision for the role and the agency taking this on is to, again, act in an advisory and kind of a general oversight role for the region, that would be appropriate, and that could go forward without any additional modification to the JPA cooperative agreement. Next, staff have worked on a draft regional funding MOU, a position description, and a wage scale that would be accompanied with that. So we have included that in their draft forms as part of the staff report for review and information at this time. I will note, we have been working with the regional team, so a lot of the staff level folks at all of our member agencies have had a chance to do an initial review, and they've been part of the discussions as we've talked about the MOU and everything. It has not made it in front of any of the councils or the board. That would be a subsequent step, should HCOG elect ultimately to take this on and to move through into finalizing those agreements. So I will note the funding MOU currently does have some draft numbers in there for agency proportional share, which right now is proposed to be based on an agency's population size relative to the county size. And it includes an approximate wage scale of $105,000 to $128,000. So that's just some of the context for how those numbers, again, that are draft and to be considered further by local agencies. That's how they came to be. The other key points of the MOU that's in there in draft form, again, because it's not necessarily necessary to update the JPA agreement, this could also serve as the binding document that would bring the RCAP and the Regional Climate Committee to HCOG, and that language is included in there. The current proposed funding term would be a 5-year commitment for local agencies, and so we're trying to line that up with the initial compliance years in the RCAP for greenhouse gas reductions, which are 2030 targets. So we thought 5 years was long enough to be able to provide some position stability for a new regional climate action plan manager, but not so long that it would potentially tie in local agencies funding a position into perpetuity, which we didn't necessarily think would be appropriate at this step. And lastly, there's a number of other things in there for how to manage, potential unforeseen cost increases, or should a local agency be unable to contribute their proportional share. There's all sorts of additional items in there as well. I will also note, lastly, that this MOU has gone through legal review by our legal counsel, so it's pretty close to the, should HCOG board, through a subsequent item that would have to be an action item, decide to move forward with taking on this role. This MOU, as it currently stands, would be pretty close to the one that we would start to work with our local agencies with. But we would finalize things again, such as the position salary, things like that, at that time. Next, the Regional Climate Committee, or the RCC organization. There was some discussion back in June on how this could look, and the two scenarios that we talked about at that time is the Regional Climate Committee being a board level advisory committee versus being a staff level, more technical committee. We did receive direction from the board to continue to explore that item. And in working with our regional partners, we kind of took the approach is to ask them what they would like to see, what the staff level folks at all of our local agencies would like to see. And the consensus is that a new board level advisory committee, similar to the PAC, but something that could be called, say, the Climate Advisory Committee, is the recommended or preferred structure for the Regional Climate Committee. So our thoughts on how that would come together is it would include the HCOG board, of course. It would include HTA, RCEA, and HWMA. It could also include Caltrans as well, as they work a lot in the climate space as well. It could include other members, should the board or anybody else deem that necessary or advantageous. So that could be developed. That standing committee could be formed via resolution, and we could talk further as to how that would interplay with HCOG board meetings or what the meeting cadence of that would be. But again, the recommendation is to make that a board level committee, and in tandem with that, to establish a regional climate technical advisory committee that serves similarly to the HCOG technical advisory committee for the transportation and HCOG related items. And that technical advisory committee could have an even broader membership of advisory committee members, so it could go outside into tribal governments or utility providers or all sorts of other technical folks that would be good to have at the table while those types of items are being discussed amongst the technical group. Lastly, one additional thing that has been discussed about in the regional group, well, for the entirety of the time at least I've been involved with it, and we had an expanded discussion on it at our last RCAP coordination meeting, is the desire, the regional group is recommending that in addition to exploring HCOG as a landing spot for the RCAP, for the manager position and for the Regional Climate Committee, that RCEA also be explored as a potential landing spot for this role and responsibility as well. Several folks believe, both would be, not, I shouldn't say several, most everybody believes either agency would be an ideal landing spot of all of the JPAs that we have in front of us. And RCA does have some advantages insofar as their size and their resources and some other things that they could bring to the table. So in a nutshell, in our last meeting, what we decided, and RCEA's executive director was part of that as well. She is going to be taking forward to her board next week a discussion item to see if they're interested in exploring and going through a similar set of steps, exploratory steps as we've done here at HCOG as well. So after they move through that and we see where that happens, the regional group is going to continue to convene and ultimately make a recommendation for which direction the region would like to move in for that position. So more to come there, but just an update to be provided. And again, the RCEA board will be discussing that at their board meeting next week. So with that, that's all I have as far as the update on those items. What we're looking for at this time is any direction or questions that the board may have on the draft items that were included in here. But at a minimum, of course, what we would ask for is, affirmative direction to continue moving forward to explore this as an option here at HCOG. So with that, I will hand it back to Mayor Johnson.
All right. Thank you. And yes, I knew somebody was going to.
I just have a well, maybe it's not a clarifying question. It may even be a bit premature. But when you mentioned RCEA, you said that they had some different capacities that we don't have. Would you mind going a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So both HCOG and RCEA are generally ideal because it has the correct board membership and composition, or close enough to it where some additional advisory members could be brought in. One, we deal with transportation, which is a huge part of the Regional Climate Action Plan, and overall is the majority of the emissions that we're targeting with the reduction measures. RCEA, of course, in building energy largely, but also, one of the biggest topics in the transportation sector is fleet electrification and the associated, problems or infrastructure that goes along with that. And actually RCEA probably more closely works in some of those areas than even HCOG does with some of the implementation work they do on charging. A few of the other things that have been discussed by the regional group. The first is RCEA is a significantly larger organization that just has more resource. They have more staff. They have more administrative support staff. They have just generally a more robust system that could probably, at least in the beginning, better support, or at least it's believed by the regional group they could better support a newly created climate program manager position. So that's one of the reasons that folks want to explore that. The other one somewhat ties back to that early statement I made about our JPA and HCOG's role as an advisory body and as a planning body. RCEA, they work a little bit differently, where they do work more directly on the implementation level work. They're leading projects that are putting in chargers, they're leading, power programs, and they're doing procurements and things of that nature. So one thought is that if some of that was housed in an agency like RCEA, that position would be more adjacent to the implementation level work, which is really where the RCAP is right now. It's going into the area of implementation, and a little bit, of course, the planning and the advisory piece are still there, but the implementation side is more where some of this is going. So those were a few of the main items.
And do they? So my understanding is, do they have connection with at least two of the tribes too? Don't they? They have two. Are they on their actual board, or is that just something? How does that? Are they just part of the regional group?
Yeah, they do. They have 2 tribal seats on RCEA, which of course would be of particular advantage. And as far as bringing them into the Climate Advisory Committee, they have all the correct membership from the county and then the cities as well. And they too would have to go through a similar step if they were to take it on, where they'd have some additional advisory memberships brought in for the climate related things in particular. So they, ultimately we would have to have an advisory position from HCOG, attend those. HWMA would ideally attend those, as would HTA. So it'd be very similar. That piece of the structure would be very similar.
And it sounds like I may have misheard you, but did you say the regional team at this time is leaning more towards RCEA?
I think the regional team sees the advantages of both. now that it is so much closer to being real, with the plan being completed and adopted by the county, and the plan is going to be rolled out for local agency approvals next, is really that last effort to think about the nuts and bolts of it. You know, one thing we have been able to do here at HCOG more heavily in the last 6 or 7 months is to really think about how this is brought in and what the position would look like and how it would actually physically operate within an organization and regionally. So in thinking about it on those terms, I think the idea right now is just to explore both options, the pros and the cons, if you will, and to, again, ultimately make a recommendation from the regional level and bring that forward to the board at which they want to target, I suppose.
But nothing can really be done until RCEA goes to their board and kind of
Correct.
identifies all of
Yeah.
that.
So that's why originally we were hoping or intending to bring this forward more as an action item with some of the draft material, seeking board direction to finalize the material as necessary and to move forward with taking this on. We still wanted to take this forward as an update and to show you what we've been working on and what we have. But the idea right now is it'll be brought forward to the RCA board just as kind of that, go, no go, please explore, or thank you, no thank you. When that concludes, after next week's meeting, we'll reconvene as the regional group and probably get a roadmap for what our final steps are here. And, one of the things that is nice is regardless of where it goes, a lot of this early legwork, thinking about actually having the conversations about regional funding, putting together some draft MOUs, thinking about the structure of it, whether it lands here or whether it lands at RCA, a lot of that material, a lot of the work that has been invested in that would be transferable, again, whether it's here or at RCEA. So,
Great. Thank you.
All right. Any
Could
other?
I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Or I'm glad that you clarified that, because that was my question: is would all of that work be transferable? And with that, would it still be then the executive director that would oversee that new position, regardless of whose umbrella it goes under?
Yes, I at least I believe so at this time. Their executive director would have to think about the specifics about how that would fold into their organization, and I'm not highly familiar with their department structure. If it was here, that's absolutely how it would be. It'd be directly under the executive director.
Okay, so that could change, as well as the job description, and being that they're less in the advisory capacity but more in implementation, that certainly could look quite different.
Yeah. It could provide some additional opportunity. I will say the job description would likely largely be the same, because that really comes out of how that position is described in the RCAP itself. So a lot of those pieces of it would be the same. Again, at RCA, they would arguably have better access to more resource and more other people on a day-to-day basis within that working organization. But the position itself and what they'd be doing would probably be the same, no matter where it's located.
So,
Yes.
so the timeline for resolving all this is what, a couple of months or?
Yeah, I would say we have a scheduled meeting with the regional planning director group the first week in February. My sense is, depending on how things, again, I'm assuming are asking that, this board is wanting us to continue down this path of considering it too, and assuming that RCA is in a similar space. We'll probably be working on some additional specifics of that over the next month or two, but I would think in March or April, it would come back to either board as an action item to take it on and to move forward with that. Because I do believe, again, the county, of course, has adopted it, and the local agencies are going to be seeing this at their council level here pretty soon too. And ideally, that would be not only the plan, but the draft, the final draft funding MOUs that we're developing here as well. So.
Yes, Mayor Rigel.
Well, I was just going to say that I don't see any problem with HCOG continuing to move forward as if we may end up being the primary. And then if it shakes out that we're not, that's fine. No great loss if we just step back, as I understand it. So.
And I will say that's certainly staff's recommendation, and it's the regional recommendation by all means. And I think what, as I've been privy to this process too, one thing that I'm really trying to also do is recognize where I need to take a step back. And, this is the region's plan as developed by our HCOG member agencies right now. And one of the things I am wanting to be respectful of as we have these conversations is really listening to what the regional group wants to explore and wants to recommend as well. Because of course, we're happy and we would be, honored to take our part in this and facilitate it too. But it's still, in some ways, like I like to say, like lives and dies with our local agencies that are adopting the plan. So
Adopting and funding.
absolutely.
Did you have Mayor Brigel?
I think you, pardon me, I think you clarified it for me, but the bottom line, the end of the line here is the regional board deciding who will take this project. It's not us saying, we're taking this project, or our CEA saying, we're taking this project. It's actually the regional board. Is that correct?
No, I think it would come through the executive director to either this board or the RCA board as a recommendation to take on this role. And I think the
Regional board?
as a recommendation from what we're kind of envisioning it at this point, and some details would have to be worked out there, but the regional group, the staff level regional group, that's the planning directors, it's the city managers, that recommendation for which JPA to bring this forward to would come from them. Similar to, if you could imagine, our RENA recommendations come as a recommendation from the regional working group.
Great. Thank you.
Yes.
I sit on this board, of course, and RCEA, and I look forward to hearing more from Beth next week. But right now, if I had to say where a better fit may be, I would say HCOG. That could change, but it feels right now to be better here. And I have a question. There was a comment in our material about an agency being able to opt out. Under what conditions might that occur?
Yeah, this is a question we shot back and forth with our legal counsel as well. And right now, the thought is a couple of things. Ultimately, a local agency, I suppose, could decide not to move forward at some subsequent time, working on compliance work under the RCAP. That could be I suppose, a board decision that could happen. So that would be one area. Another one, and the more likely one that I think we're actually thinking about in terms of the MOU, is if, say, a few years down the line, a local agency who has adopted the RCAP and is, working and doing things under the RCAP has some extenuating circumstance where maybe they can't provide funding in full as part of the MOU, or maybe they can't provide funding at all. That's really more of the scenario we're trying to just think and plan for, is knowing, we have a 5-year MOU, we want to provide stability to that, but there may be some circumstance that needs to be provided for if an agency needs to take a step back from a financial perspective.
Yes, Supervisor Madrone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good discussion, good questions. Mayor Brigel, you asked a lot of things that were in my head, so thank you for getting those clarifications as well. Skip. So, if I understand it, the regional group would make a recommendation. The RCEA board is going to consider this issue at their board next week. We're considering it tonight, but we're not making any final decisions. We might give you some direction. And And then ultimately, between those two boards, RCEA and HCOG, one of them may say, yes, we would like to take on the role, and the other may say not, or both may say, yes, we'd like the role. And maybe it'll go like it went tonight with these appointments. And somebody will say, well, we'll step down, you know. That'll just get figured out one way or another. It'll kind of just happen one way or another, because you can't both do it. So something I've always been curious about, it's a little off track, but hopefully relative. Rio Del's not on HCOG. They're a city. Is there a reason why they're not represented?
They're on. They just haven't been here.
Yeah.
Oh, they haven't. So there's 8 of us?
Yeah.
Oh, there's an even number. God, so there, I'm learning something tonight. So there is 8 members, which is always an interesting thing. We have that on some other boards I'm on. And, you know, if a tie happens, I guess then, like in the city, the mayor breaks the tie. The mayor doesn't even vote except, you know, so you have 6, right? 5 council members and then the mayor. In Eureka, yes. Okay, so there's actually 8. That settles that. Now, if McKinneyville incorporates, that'll be a dilemma. Maybe we go to 9. I don't know, because they're pretty big. But that's all off track. Sorry. I will say, like you, Councilman Jorgensen, I would like to see it with HCOG. I think not only do we deal with transportation so deeply, and I understand the argument, or not argument, but element that you brought forward about how RCEA is very involved in the energy aspects of transportation. That's certainly a very huge role in transportation, but we deal with housing more so now. That's really something we started expanding into, trying to focus on, and we've gotten some grants and things. And so dealing with housing, with transportation, all the things we do, I think it's a better fit personally. Because RCEA is really focused heavily on the energy part, which is only a piece of the larger puzzle. And I think we deal with more pieces of the puzzle, let me just say. But, you know, like Councilman Kenny said, I could be supportive of either direction. I'm just very much leaning towards it's sitting with HCOG. But again, as also was said by Councilman Kenny, you know, we can continue with us being interested if that's the direction of the board. We'll see. And see what the RCEA board does. From that, the advice of the working group, and then come back and make a decision. So I'm comfortable with that, but I feel like it's a really good fit for us. And I recognize it will be a stretch administratively, but that's how things are. I mean, taking on housing was similar, you know, and we start building staff over time because other resources come to bear. I would say the last step is, even if one of us decide we want to be the entity to manage this, we ultimately still have to go back to all our individual members and see if they're on board with all that, right? So that's got to happen before it actually becomes really final. Okay, thank you.
That's the one thing, is it all has to go back to our respective agencies and get voted on.
And that's one of the pieces we're talking about in how this process fits in with how the RCAP will show up for adoption at the local agency level. We really kind of want to, you know, line up as many of the dominoes, if you will, so that they can be discussed and you know, brought forward for decisions at the local level as we can. So,
lastly, if I might, Mr. Chair, TAC, PAC, those are great. CAC, oh God, can we come up with something different? Just trying to think on the acronym game, you know, because that's marketing as well. I mean, it's a simple thing, but, you know, maybe there's something better than that. Just saying.
oh yeah, well we'll ask ChatGPT if they have some recommendations for that. Yeah.
Neither of those work good.
Well, I guess it's the regional in the plan. It's the Regional Climate Committee, the RCC. Let's stick with that one. Yeah.
The Rock.
Regional Operating Climate Committee.
Yeah. I was going to just give a heads up if there's any public comment before we finish up our board discussion. Is there any other questions or comment? The PAC, yes.
I was just wondering if there are any other RTPAs statewide that are doing something similar that we could ask.
I think there are some other, I don't know if there are RTPAs. I know there are other JPAs that are ultimately looking at taking on this role. That's one area we're still kind of working on seeing what that would look like and what the other comparable examples are, to see, this is really early on kind of in a lot of the process here. And honestly, a lot of the, a lot of this comes out of Senate, I forget if it's Assembly Bill or Senate Bill 375. But a lot of this compliance is only actually necessarily relevant to the MPOs. So I don't necessarily think a lot of the other RTPAs or COGs have really tackled it yet, but I'm sure some have, and those are examples we're looking for. So
That's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. If there's no more comments from the board other than me, I would just say that I echo Supervisor Madrone in seeing where it goes. I'm not sold one way or the other to see who can handle it better. I've done a lot of, when you talk about implementation, I'd done a lot of projects with RCEA when I was still in Public Works, and they do a phenomenal job of lining things up and having their engineers do the drawings and get things ready. And so that's a plus on that side. Planning side, I don't know how they are there, but I know we have planners on staff. But they do have a planner as an executive director, so.
And one thing I will note, no matter what happens, we're all still at the table. We're all bringing our resources, to bear on this. And a lot of those implementation measures, as they're authored in the CAP, are work that is parallel with a lot of agency work that's happening. So no matter where the committee is convened or the program manager is cited, a lot of the aligned work is all the same, and we're still all part of it too. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. That again, no matter what happens, we're still all in it. So.
All right. Well, if there's any public comment here in the audience before we look for the online, seeing none. So, Colin, I think you're first in line there.
Good afternoon, board members. Colin Fisk from CRTP. And, on behalf of our organization, I just want to say that we appreciate all the work that HCOG has put into developing this proposal and the position description and so on. And we also support exploring whether the position should be housed at HCOG or at RCEA. And we'll look forward to more discussion on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm guessing that's Tom with Epic.
It's actually Matt Simmons with Epic.
Okay.
Matt Simmons, climate attorney at Epic. I want to echo what Colin said. I think exploring RCEA as the body to hold this position is really interesting and something that I'll attend the RCEA board next week to learn more about. We've been following this process for quite a number of years, and we're finally at the implementation stage, and it's really important that it's done well. Thank you.
And thank you. And JM.
Good evening, board again. It would be maybe a suggestion to see if just the timestamp from this discussion in your meeting tonight could be sent prior to RCA, something for them to review so that all your thoughts and stuff are exactly what they are. I think it's valid to work with them. However, for the main governing board, I would prefer HCOG. And honestly, it's not that you guys have really all the pieces that are going to help make this easier right now, but you guys allow a lot better public participation, in my opinion. It's a lot easier for the public to be involved with your meetings and to be aware of what's coming. And so just from a public perspective, I feel more comfortable with this board being transparent and available to communicate with a lot easier. I would think that when it comes to this hiring of the director, I would like to keep that very transparent too for the public. And also our last board member that spoke, I really agree with her thoughts too that there are other pathways potentially still while we're in this early process that we should entertain all that are possible. But again, thank you for your time, and hopefully we'll get some resolution soon. Thank you.
And thank you. So I think you get some direction here and continue to explore and see where we shake out there.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
And thank you. And now we come to another discussion item, the Regional Transportation Plan Public Comment Review. And will you take the lead on that?
Yeah, I'll actually hand this one over to our Associate Planner, Stevie Luther.
Yes, please. Thank you, Director Byrd. I'm Stevie Luther, Associate Regional Planner. Good evening. And tonight I'll be walking through the Regional Transportation Plan and the public engagement that we've had to date, our final survey results, and the comments that were emailed in response to our public review draft. So we put out the survey and have gotten a total of 216 responses. Perfect. And then I can click. Awesome. Oh, and before that, just a quick note about how we got to this point from launching the RTP process in August to your board and putting the information on our webpage, doing 4 community events, and doing a public meeting in October in McKinleyville, and then to your board reviewing the public review draft and releasing for official public comment in November. We closed that public comment period on December 28th. And now at this meeting, we are reviewing those comments prior to your board reviewing and adopting, considering adoption of the 2026 RTP in February. So a few updates on the survey results here. The question 1 of how satisfied are you with transportation choices? We're up to 31% that were somewhat dissatisfied. Still, mostly 43% were satisfied. Also looking at our question 11, ranking the strategies in terms of order of importance. The top issue was enhancing walking and bicycling comfort, followed very closely by maintaining existing roads, which should have the largest number of priority 1 responses. The least important in these survey responses was supporting the transition to electric vehicles. And, you know, these results do help guide our work. The full results are in an appendix that goes with the RTP, and we do reference this back in our day-to-day work. And then continuing with the theme of road maintenance that you'll see, 69% of folks disagreed with the statement that roads are maintained well. So that was a pretty large result. And then people also disagreed that public transit options met their needs. And a few other questions kind of continue with the road maintenance theme. The top community transportation challenge was poor road conditions, and again followed by safe places to bike and walk. And as far as a ranking of the types of projects that folks would want to see us applied our HCOG funding towards, local road maintenance was the top answer, followed again by complete street, like rehabilitation type projects, and then multi-use commuter trails and protected bicycle lanes. And then question 10 was, this is just the word cloud. This was an open-ended question in which people are asked to describe your ideal transportation system in 1 to 5 words. So we can see bike, safe, walking, accessible, convenient, roads are all some of the most mentioned words. And again, the full results of individual responses are included in the appendix, and you can see people's creative and colorful responses to this question. So that's it just on the public survey overview. And then I want to get into the public comments that were received by email. We did receive a total of 41 comments, and 31 of those were from CRTP and EPIC supporters following a call to action, as well as CRTP, EPIC, and 350 Humboldt's longer letter. And the three main issues that we'll address tonight are: number one, restoring the term climate crisis throughout the RTP. Folks passionately urge us to look at the scientific consensus and the urgency of reducing emissions. The second issue was keeping the existing policy that 80% of new housing be located in places accessible by walking, biking, rolling, or transit. And the third issue being retaining the funding consistency analysis. And I'll go through each one of those. So as far as the climate terminology, I want to say the intention of this was not at all to roll back HCOG's climate commitments. And I do recognize the concerns and distress and disappointment by people that had commented on this and reflected disappointment in local government like backing down on climate action. And per the board and tax recommendations, our path forward that we're recommending is to keep the headings as they are proposed now as climate change, but we would restore the use of the term climate crisis in several instances throughout the body of the text, as well as adding this sentence that you see on the screen to the first page of the climate change chapter to reflect our commitment to addressing the climate crisis. Then the housing target date. Here's the proposed policy, striking out 2022 and replacing it with 2030. Folks that were commenting really took issue finding that this would somehow encourage more sprawl and long-term car dependence, and that we were, substantively delaying this requirement and kind of backtracking on some policy that was currently in effect. And I want to be clear, the proposed change in this policy target date does not in any way change HCOG's commitment and our acting policy towards housing and infill development. We're just looking more pragmatically at what we have available now and in terms of data. So this is looking at the work from Noah Sari, who did our baseline report for the safe and sustainable transportation targets, publishing this report in September 2025. And looking at the specific target we're talking about for housing, he had looked at what percent of units permitted in 2021 were walkable and or bikeable according to the available data through the walk score. And countywide, on average, only 34% were walkable, 43% were bikeable. Obviously, those numbers are higher in Arcata and Eureka. And one thing that is largely missing from this analysis is the transit score, and really being able to do a deep dive on the time it would take people to get to access destinations by transit from particular locations where housing could be built. We have some of that data as far as where transit stops are, but we really haven't developed that analysis quantitatively in terms of travel time. And we want to take time to better understand that.
Is that green an average of that?
Yes, okay. The green is an average, correct. And so again, this is a target that, this is an area that HCOG will continue to work on regardless. Elsewhere in our RTP, in the element 6 land use transportation element, we have these policies, which I won't read out loud, but just for reference. committing to support for compact mixed-use development, supporting land use planning that would reduce driving through infill development. And we do in our work in advising agencies often reference these policies in support letters and educationally to encourage jurisdictions to pursue this type of development. And we'll continue doing that work. As well as doing the quantitative work that we feel is needed to really be able to meet the target that we're saying. So in terms of staff recommendation, we feel like the target year, we will take board direction either way, whether you want to keep it in effect as being in 2022 or move it to 2030. From our perspective, the work remains the same. And then lastly, the funding consistency. This is primarily taking issue with how discretionary funding like the Regional Transportation Improvement Plan, the RTIP, is decided. And advocates question if this process of agency selected projects is really enough to ensure that HCOG funds are going towards meeting goals that are in the RTP. This has been an issue brought up many times before, difference of opinion, and the board and TAC have considered and been aware of this ranking prioritization approach. And if they want to direct staff to take a different approach than we have in the past, we will take that direction. And then a few other last issues. The US 101 Trinidad Area Access Improvement Project is in the RTP as a project of the Sharia Heights Indian community of the Trinidad Rancheria in our Chapter 4 Tribal Transportation element. This is where we solicit project info from the tribes so that we can align their project goals and long-term plans with the rest of the region. This isn't something that we edit. We take their project description and put it into the chapter. And so it's not an area, unfortunately, where we feel like there is room to make any edits, but we do acknowledge receiving these comments. And then a few comments have been received from local agencies. The Caltrans District 1 comment letter was received on Friday, January 9th, and we're working on putting those suggestions and edits into our final draft, as well as comments that came from the Humboldt Transit Authority. And then one not listed on here is the Peninsula Community Collaborative had written asking us to make a mention of the Samoa Manila Trail along the Great Redwood Trail Alliance as a potential long-term project, so that could be listed in the RTP. And that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions and hear feedback from the board and the public. Thank you.
All right. Mayor Burgell has questions.
Thanks for that report. I'm just curious. I noticed in that first slide where you talked about climate change, climate crisis. So, and in the body of that paragraph, it said one-time climate change, one-time climate crisis. So are those going to be interchangeable during the document, or will there be some sort of consistency in the body of the document? I understand the title, you're not going to change, or you are going to change, whatever. But during the body, is there going to be consistency?
There are, the terms are largely interchangeable, but there are places where just the syntax and what it's describing, the situation it's describing, the term climate crisis applies more.
Okay.
And in particular, when we're looking at some of the state policies and like a state level response, climate crisis works in those cases. So there are 2 or 3 instances like that, and I can show you the examples too if you're curious.
Yeah, consistency is always something that I appreciate about reports, and so thank you.
Mayor Kinney.
What year was 2022 selected as the date for meeting the 80%?
That was the 2022 RTP. So it was essentially that the very same year it was adopted.
Okay. You got a comment?
No, I'm done.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to staff and all the partner agencies that have been deeply involved in this. It's an incredible document. A lot of hard work goes into this. Even before I was on the board, I did have some questions about the ranking process or non-ranking process, and really just agencies bringing forth projects. And I know there was pushback from the TAC on that. You were on the TAC at that time, and it can be complicated. Any ranking process has its pros and cons and faults and pluses, whatever. But I do think it's important that at some level we're trying to make sure that what we're selecting does tie back into our goals. And if we're not ranking them based, and there used to, last time I looked at it, there was a bunch of columns that, does it do this, does it do this, does it do this, and you get a check box in those various columns, and some would have every box checked but not recommended for funding, some would have only a few boxes but recommended for funding. So I do think we need to improve that, for transparency and to make sure that we're meeting our goals. I know it gets pretty political. I've talked with our representative at the county, Tom Mattson, a lot about this, and Tom has often said, that he personally works really hard to try and not gobble up all the money at the county level. I think the surveys you did are extremely reflective of why the voters passed Measure O, I would have to say, which, we did a lot of polling. I was very engaged in that effort, and yeah, people are not happy with the county road system. But this document and this effort represents all the cities as well as all of the county. Trinidad has the highest, what is it called, PCI, Pavement Condition Index, of anywhere in the county, but they only got a mile of roads, or whatever. But they do a great job of maintaining their roads for a small city with limited resources. The county has, I think, the lowest PCI and heading in a bad direction, which again is why the voters, I think, said, please, I'll put a 1 cent sales tax on myself at a time of inflation and economic crisis and everything, and they still did it at 60-some%. It's phenomenal, right? So that reinforces itself there. I also want to say thank you to the Caltrans representative for that detailed letter. What was it, 20 pages of comments? I mean, and I hope you don't feel like it reflects at all on your work, because your work is incredible, but this person invested a tremendous amount of time in trying to be helpful, I think. And I'm sure you guys see it that way, that, wow, it was caught every little dot and T and everything else. But really important and good concrete input. So I want to please pass that on to that individual, because that was great. You mentioned that the Peninsula community submitted a recent recommendation in this public outreach process of the Manila-Samoa Trail. And yeah, there's a lot of activity there, and even Caltrans has been doing a route study there for a while. And of course, the Great Redwood Trail has also got its own planning and investigations, working with the Manila community and others. A lot of great opportunities there in regards to not only the trail, but maybe a setback levy as we keep purchasing all those properties on the south side of Samoa Boulevard to let it all be bay again, all the way up to a setback levy. Anyway, that's a whole detailed discussion. But what I wanted to say was that in McKinleyville, as you know, we just passed our town center ordinance, which is an amazing thing. 6 years worth of work. It was actually in our 2001 community plan, do this ordinance, but it took us 6 years to get there. And there was a lot of discussion about the road diet in Central Avenue. I don't think anybody feels that it's totally safe and couldn't be redone, but there's a lot of discussion around what that looks like. And we've confirmed to the community as a county that nothing will happen there until we really do a deep dive into really serious preliminary engineering, roundabouts, all kinds of other things. But something that came up in this process was something that never really was thought about much, which was an on-ramp and an off-ramp at Hiller Road. It's too close to School Road to meet the 1 mile distance that is dictated in terms of how close these interchanges can be. But the Trinidad Rancheria got funding, $750,000 a while back to start that project study report and everything else for an interchange that's a half mile from the Trinidad off-ramp and interchange to provide economic development for a tribe, which I fully support. but we're talking about 17,000 people in McKinleyville and economic development of a town center that's on Hiller Road. And this idea of having just a south on-ramp and a northbound off-ramp, just two, you don't have to do all four because going north is a different story. But from the south, having that connectivity at Hiller Road and considering those an off-ramp and an on-ramp there, I would very much like to see that in the RTP. I was told it was too late, but I'm hearing that it's not too late to offer up suggestions of projects for the RTIP. So I don't know what the process is, but I would very much love to see that on the table so it can be discussed. And of course, Caltrans is in the process of doing a Route 101 study that incorporates some of that area that's going to be going on over the next several years. And Tom Matson has said that he's got some ideas on some sources of funding that may be separate from RTIP to try and get some preliminary stuff going on there, like looking at vehicle mile travels and other things. But I got to say, having that would be a game changer in McKinleyville for traffic on Central Avenue, bicycle and walking safety, and not just shunting it to McKinleyville Avenue, but get people on and off the freeway right in the center of town. Imagine that, oh my God, with another 6,000 people in the town center in 20 years. So is there a way to be able to add that concept into the RTP? Or am I too late and have to wait 5 years till this rolls around again?
The way we usually do that is just soliciting to the local agency
through the
staff,
representatives.
through people such as Director Madsen, to see what projects that they would like.
But what he said to
nominated
me
in there.
was that,
So,
unfortunately, when the idea came forward, it was right after he had been asked to give his stuff.
yeah, I wouldn't. Here's the thing: until it's a final document, in my eyes, it's never too late to be discussed and considered. And I think it's something that if we get positive confirmation from the county that they would like to see that in there and considered in a final draft to be brought forward, I don't see personally any harm in it. The one thing I will note, the RTP is largely a compilation of some near-term projects that agencies know that they're working towards, but there's a lot of projects in there that it's, they're not necessarily fully vetted ideas yet, and that's not necessarily the intent. It's to start to roadmap what some of those potential future improvements could be and to move forward with that. So, there's no requirement that as you're delivering or nominating said project that it needs to immediately check all the boxes. That's what some of the subsequent steps are, certainly for HCOG funding, are to provide all those other things and to show us what you need. But yeah, I would say ultimately, no, it's not too late for us to consider that.
So is my request right now good enough, or should I go back to Tom and ask him to bring the request forward?
To follow, I'm a big process guy,
I
so
hear you.
let's have Tom
That sounds
make
perfect.
a formal
I
transmittal.
appreciate the
Yeah.
feedback. Thank you very much for that. And I appreciate your presentation, Steve. Thank you very much. And again, I want to honor staff and all the hard work and all the partner agencies that have worked on this project. It's been a lot of hard work. This is not an easy thing. There's never enough money to go around, and we somehow have to all work together to try and do the things that really are critical right now to move forward. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Yes.
I just had a question following up on that. Is there a fiscally unconstrained project list in the RTP currently?
I don't know that answer off the top of my head.
I believe we do in our table, Complete Street 7 have constrained and unconstrained projects separated
Because
out.
that could be a good place to capture those needs.
Can we get a little definition of that term so we can follow along with you better?
Constrained being the term for projects that have a funding source identified, and unconstrained, nobody knows where the money would come from.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I will note that the majority of the projects listed by local agencies in the RTP would be, oh gosh,
Unconstrained.
not having funding. That one. Unconstrained, yeah. Unfortunately.
Good question. I think we all learned something too. But back to is there any questions or comments from board members, PAC members? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Yes, it's time to come forward, ma'am.
name is Nancy Ihara, and I am a member of 350 Humboldt, but I kind of want to, these are really my comments, because I'm not totally sure that I'm accurate about what I'm saying. So decades ago, I attended a TAC meeting, and I actually do not remember why. I suspect it had something to do with the need for public transit in Manila, where I live. What I vividly remember, however, were the many pages of public work improvement proposals submitted by the jurisdictions in attendance. With limited money, my understanding was that it was the responsibility of the TAC and with the staff to prioritize these projects. And it was obviously not an easy task. Again, I hope I'm understanding this correctly. The funding consistency analysis, and that's what I'm addressing, of the present RTP assists in this process. Presently, this analysis prioritizes alignments of projects with the RTP. Hope this is correct. The new draft RTP does not do this. I urge the board to return to the language of the older document. Alliance with that language in the older RTP, the 2022, is more responsive to the present climate crisis that we are experiencing. Thank you.
Thank you. And see any other public comment here in the room? Okay. I see Colin Fisk and CRTP.
Hello again, Alan Fisk with CRTP. I'd like to address the three main issues that you just heard about in Mr. Luther's staff report. First, the use of the phrase climate crisis. We do appreciate the restoration of some uses of the phrase in the RTP, but we just continue to be mystified as to why the change was made in the first place. As your staff report points out, and as we said before, the phrase is used throughout official California climate policy documents and other official documents worldwide. And so we would just ask that you simply reverse that original change and restore all of the uses of climate crisis. Second is the issue of that 80%, what I call non-car dependent housing, whether that target should be delayed or not. The staff continue to look to NOAA SARI's analysis as evidence that the goal is not currently achievable. But as I think I've said before, NOAA's analysis, while it's very helpful in many ways, made a mistake on this particular issue, because those metrics that he used, the walkability and bikeability metrics, incorporate infrastructure concerns, and he was not able to assess transit at all. In contrast, this particular target in the RTP is about travel time potential by these modes. It's not about the infrastructure. Of course, no one, least of all CRTP, is denying the urgent need for infrastructure upgrades, but that 80% target can be met today regardless of infrastructure deficiencies, because it is about relative location. And locating more housing in those areas will probably increase support and funding for those kinds of infrastructure improvements. So we again ask that you keep the existing target and not delay it. Third, and most importantly, the funding consistency policy. I just want to quote here the RTP's overall objective, in other words, its main reason for existence. And that is, quote, program all transportation funds based on multimodal transportation goals and objectives and needs and priorities as established in the regional transportation plan, end quote. So I really don't understand how we're having a debate about whether funding decisions should be objectively assessed and prioritized against the RTP's plans and policies. That is the reason for the RTP's existence, and arguably the reason for HCOG's existence as the RTPA. So to summarize, we ask that you restore all the uses of the phrase climate crisis, keep that non-car dependent housing target, and most importantly, include a clear policy that requires funding decisions to be assessed and prioritized by how well they promote RTP goals and objectives, which will ensure that HCOG's dollars go the furthest towards saving lives, towards tackling the climate crisis and towards promoting equity and the local economy. Thank you.
Thank you. And it looks JM is next.
Thank you again, board. This has definitely been a topic you guys have been on for a long time. I personally support the verbiage of climate change. I feel like if it truly was a crisis, honestly, you guys would not be focused on transportation. You'd be focused on all the pollutants coming in into our oceans from across the seas, the stuff that they're spraying on us every day, food security. We would be worried about a lot of other things if this truly was a crisis. So I think using one thing to get another is very misleading. I think it's more fair to be like what Colin was just saying, once we get these housing, then we can support this transit. I think I don't think it's very proper to use one thing to get another thing, when honestly, it is such a minuscule piece of the puzzle. Just personally from a farmer perspective and longtime generational person of Humboldt. So that's the only thing I see that's really I feel uncomfortable with all the time when you guys are putting this stuff forward, is that it is a bit of fear mongering without actually taking a chance to look at the other things that are actually affecting us. Why is there fluoride in our municipality's water still? If we're really concerned about everybody's common good and health. So I'll leave it at that, but thank you for letting me talk tonight.
Thank you. And Epic.
Hello again, Matthew Simmons, the climate attorney at Epic. First, I want to second everything Colin Fisk said. He does such a good job giving public comments that I'm often left wondering what to say. Couple of key things that I want to add to his comments. The term climate crisis was actually used in a quote from the state of California, which an earlier version of this document changed to climate change. And so we crossed out crisis in a quote from the state of California and wrote in change. And I think the fact that that happened illustrates why, sticking with the term crisis throughout the document just makes more sense. It's just a more accurate depiction of, the reality of what we're going through. Second, I want to state, for the record, and I think you're all aware of this, that according to the Regional Climate Action Plan, over 70% of our county's greenhouse gas emissions come from transportation. So I don't think it makes sense to not focus on transportation-related impacts when considering how to fight climate change. Third, with the goal of building 80% of new housing in walkable and bikeable and public transit usable places, I think the fact that we established that goal in 2022 and we're here in 2026 and we are clearly not meeting that goal according to that analysis is not evidence that we should push back the goal. It's evidence that we should try harder to push for the goal. And so I would ask you not to delay it until 2030 because we failed to meet it so far. I'll also note, and HCOG is aware of this, according to the regional housing needs allocation, there's hopefully going to be built a lot more housing built in the next 4 years before 2030. And so I think we should be doing everything we can to make sure that that housing is planned for in a way that supports our climate and transportation goals. And so not having that goal in the next 4 years, I think could actually have a substantive impact. Finally, with regards to the having an objective standard for transportation plans, I agree with Colin that it sort of calls into question the entire purpose of the regional transportation plan. And I do want to flag what Supervisor Madrone said about how important it is to have those objective criteria, but how it doesn't always restrict you from funding things, right? You can check the box on just a few things, but still fund a project because you feel like, for certain other reasons that weren't captured by that checklist, it needs to be funded. I do think for public transparency, it just is extremely helpful to have, some sort of objective criteria that explains why some projects are being funded while others aren't. And if, those criteria need to change, that's a discussion that we can have, but I don't think we should not have any criteria. Thank you for this opportunity to comment, and good night.
Thank you. And think you've got direction. Do we? That's what I want to know is, yeah. So that's what I was building up to. And so go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for all the public commenters. I do want to say that as for the goal, I would like to see it stay the same. I think it's important when you're working towards a goal, you may not hit the mark, but pushing it out further, you're slowing yourself down. I think that continuing to work towards a goal, regardless of how short or long you have, is important. And then I too am a big fan of consistency in the language in the document, whether that's change or crisis. You know, we've got both sides in public comment. I just think the language should be consistent throughout the document. I think it's more clear and easier to understand that way.
Okay. And you have a comment there.
Yeah, so, well, I already made a lot of comments. I'll keep it brief. I think keeping the deadline 2022 is good. Whether we say 2030 or 2022, it's not going to affect what we do, although it should. And I think the way it affects what we do is through the prioritization process, a transparent process of ranking where we're putting our money. So the RTP has a real substance, and we're actually working towards fulfilling those goals. And I think it will influence project development and projects being put forward and projects being funded when we implement that kind of a prioritization process. Because, for instance, with all the work the community of McKinleyville did to develop a town center ordinance that's going to unleash densified housing that is totally walkable in downtown and will lead to transit being available and efficient, because right now McKinleyville's too sprawled out to actually have a transit system. We have a go-through thing, but it doesn't really even work for that because it wanders around a little bit, but it doesn't really reach the community. And this town center ordinance is going to lead to that. And it will also attract funding for these things, because we did what everybody's saying we should do, which is densify, make it walkable, build new housing. So while on the chart it showed in 2021 2 new permits for the county, this is 2,500 units, you know, in downtown that are now ministerially available to be approved, which we've heard from developers for decades that they're not willing to make investments anymore in development of housing because it doesn't pencil out, because it's discretionary permitting with a lot of NIMBYism and other things that ultimately lead to all kinds of new conditions thrown on the developer after they've made a decision to invest, and then they back out because they go, whoa, that's too much for me, right? So in McKinleyville now, this whole thing's ministerial. They know the conditions that are placed upon them through form-based code that's part of the ordinance, right? So I absolutely know from experience and reading online and everything that this is going to lead to development that will attract the money for things like the Hiller ramps, that is a game changer, access from the middle of town, and things like that. So I really, that's the strongest thing I feel about the 3 issues. I think consistency is good on the naming, but whether we call it change or crisis, I don't think is going to change what we ultimately do. I think what changes is having a prioritization process where all of us, the county, the cities, will then go, wow, we better make sure whatever projects we're putting forward really hit the mark. So it will change that behavior. And I think that's a good thing. So that's my comments.
All right. Mayor Kim.
So I'm not sure that I should weigh in because I'm brand new to this board, but I do have some feelings about it. I have a huge learning curve. I do concur with Kim, Mayor Bergel, excuse me, that the goal 2022 should stay. We should not be pushing that out. And I think that that also was stated by both Colin from CRTP and Matt from EPIC. And the verbiage was brought out using the word crises is fear-mongering, and I personally think we need to be more fearful. And I would like to keep that verbiage because words do matter. Just as the date, if we push it out, that kind of makes us a little lackadaisical, and maybe it won't be that we will meet that goal versus, look, we missed the mark and we really do need to get on this now. Anyway, that's all I have to say for now. I'm sure I'll have more later.
Okay, thank you. And any comments from Councilmember Jorgensen?
I think we should call it Earth Crisis. It does need to be more meaningful what we're dealing with. So many people out there are not taking this seriously.
Is your mic on? He just asked
Oh,
me that.
I'm sorry. So I do agree with crisis or a term that is more meaningful. That's it.
All right, well, thank you. Yeah, yeah.
I have somewhat mixed feelings about whether to support staff recommendation but it seems that our board is pretty well committed to wanting to stick to the climate crisis language, and so I'm not gonna go against that. It's a little puzzling to me, though, why in 2022 we didn't set the goal for 2025, for example, instead of just saying in 2022 we want to instantly have 80% of our housing. So that's a little puzzling.
Yeah, and I think, if I was to put a little bit of a point on that one specifically, there was a lot of goals in there that, for lack of any understanding on what was happening, that they had instant implementations or very near-term implementations for a lot of units or a lot of vehicle chargers or a number of things. And I think what we're looking at here is it's in no way saying that is not our goal, because the goal remains the same. It's more of a statement as to when the goal is going to be achieved, or when we can hopefully achieve the goal. So, Stevie had touched on it, and Colin had touched on it too. There's three things we're looking at with the goal. We're looking at biking, walking, and transit. And the transit criteria as part of that analysis has yet to be done. So one of the things that we will have to continue to look on, beyond this discussion, is identifying and defining what that is. But the thing we do know is we have work to do there. We have places like McKinleyville, which is basically a main line shot for transit currently. We have places like Fortuna that are somewhere in the middle. And then Arcata and Eureka are the ones that have more robust service. So there is an acknowledgement, especially given with the fact that housing development will continue all over the county, that the transit system is going to have to improve. And in the biking infrastructure, we'll have to improve with that. Bike Score does include infrastructure as part of its measurement. So again, there are projects and things that need to happen. I think going back to Stevie's point, we can keep it both the same, because our eyes are on the same goal. It's, do we want to look at it through the measurement of when we think we're going to get there with the effort we're putting in, or do we want to just say this is the number, we're going to put it in 2022, and do we do it? So we're happy to take either direction. I think it's just how you want to, I guess, think about when you're gonna get there. So, and one thing I will note on it too. So in addition to the transit score and how we substantiate that in the coming years, each one of your local agencies is about to dive headfirst into your housing element, your Cycle 7 housing element. And that's going to be a tremendous opportunity for all local agencies to really understand, where your compliance sites are, where you're going to be doing your zoning to accomplish the goals. And, there could be instances where simply doing upzoning and infill in the dense areas is not going to be able to be substantiated in a housing element. So there's more work to be done. And I think when we have this discussion in 4 years, we're going to have an even significantly better understanding of where we are. So.
Well, thank you. And, it may seem weird to have a goal for 2022 that we're looking to set and meet the mark in 2030, but the actual goal is the 80%, not the year, and we want to work towards meeting the goal, and that's where we're at right now. So I don't think the year is as important as meeting it. And again, that comes down to, I think we'd all love to be like Supervisor Madrone and have 2,500 units of ministerially approved in a upzoning in a constraint, not a constrained, but a specific area. But we don't all have that, but we all have things that we can do and make things available for developers so that we can see that they do get built. Because that's the thing, is we can have everything ready, but the developer themselves are the ones that make sure it's built. So that's where we're constrained, you might say. So we can hope for that. And again, I do hope that we meet that goal. So that's the main thing, is to get it met. But I think you've got your direction now and where we're going to go. So
Could I make another comment, please?
yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thinking back to 2022, 4 years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago, I started hearing a lot at the board from developers about exactly what Chair Johnson is saying. Like the Kramer development out there by Cutton, or the Forrester McGill from 15 years ago, or, and these are county areas, but it required the city to also be a partner in many ways because of infrastructure, or Humboldt Community Services, as well. And we kept, for years we've been hearing this from the development community, the investors that make these things happen ultimately, that rely upon these regulations to be clear and definable and not constantly changing on them as they go forward. And that I have heard that so much while I've been in office. So I'm really excited about what the community of McKinleyville has done, thanks to John Ford, the planning department, and the MCMAC in McKinleyville. East Eureka for a while had a GMAC, or a Greater Eureka MAC, but it didn't last very long, and I think it's because it's right next to a city. I don't know, but you might have your own opinions on that. But whereas McKinleyville's on its own, it's like, it's 17,000 people, and it's unincorporated, which is kind of crazy. So I think, working on the elements that allow for those investments to happen in a solid and, comfortable way to where they're willing to make those investments, that is a turning point. So when I look up there and I see 2, and I realize now we've opened up 25, that is incredibly exciting. And I know that the city of Eureka has done a tremendous, and Arcata, frankly, and Fortuna as well. All these cities have really been doing a lot of projects. And everybody's starting to go up, because that's all you can do unless you want to cover your farmlands and all the rest of it, right? And being innovative with parking lots, and whatever it takes. So I personally am seeing a lot of good positive movement towards the change in our ability to meet these targets compared to where we were at in 2022. So again, the date doesn't matter to me as much as the goal, like was said by the chair. And I think we're heading in a good direction to make that happen. I don't think anybody thinks we'll meet all of those RENA numbers, because they're pretty large, but I think we're going to do a whole lot better than we've been doing because of these things that are happening. So that's, on the positive note, I think that's good movement.
All right. Any other comments? Board comments? So I think you've got something now to work with. And I do have to say, I was surprised looking around and seeing the number of units that Fortuna had going all at once, and just keep moving. And so that's a positive change to meet some goals. So, all right. Well, at this time, we would reconvene as the board by motion and approve the PAC recommendations, which is, in this case, is the consent calendar.
So move.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to reconvene as the HCOG board and can approve the recommendations. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. And that brings us to staff and PAC member reports, and we get to hear the mellifluous tones of our executive director again.
I feel like I have to look that word up.
Is that really?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not bad at language. I mean, that sentence didn't make me sound really good at it, but yeah, I'm
You're
gonna have
unconstrained.
I'm gonna have to add that one. Well, apparently I'm slightly constrained because I haven't heard that one. I do have a few things I'd like to just bring forward to the board and just let you know what we're working on. So, as the board may recall, earlier in 2025, we did recommend and the board approved convening a trails ad hoc committee to start working on a number of trail-related issues across the county. We do have a meeting next week. We had our introductory meeting in the last quarter of 2025. We're going to be talking about trail mile marking, and specifically as that pertains to emergency access and looking at ingress egress points on the trail. We will be talking to some of the EMS providers as part of that as well, making sure they're early in on the conversation as we start talking about trail marking and trail signage. And the other thing we're going to be looking at is some potential options for some near-term funding augmentation for unforeseen maintenance needs. So we'll be talking about that, and hopefully we'll be able to bring some things forward to the TAC and to the board in the coming months for some consideration. Kind of in line with that, we recently held a meeting with Great Redwood Trail Agency staff. It was actually just yesterday, and we got a good update from what's going on there. Just an update for the board. They're going to probably be considering adoption and finalizing their master plan in March. We did talk about expenditure and project priorities. Of course, the Great Redwood Trail Agency in the last state approved budget had $50 million set aside for Great Redwood Trail Agency projects. So we trying to work with them to identify what those priority areas are and to see where we can help at HCOG leverage resource, whether that be HCOG or working with local agency staff, recognizing that they're going to be looking to make a significant number of trail investments in a relatively short period of time. So more to come on that as well. Just so the board is aware, our RFP for the pavement management plan, the proposal period closes tomorrow. So we will be bringing that forward in February and working with local agencies on the next chapter, if you will, of the pavement management plan. We're hopefully within a week or two from releasing our RFP for the Lolita Safe Routes to School planning and preliminary design project that, of course, is grant funded through a Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Grant. We're continuing to work with, and we have some meetings next week to work with our local agency partners that are participating in our Vision Zero demonstration projects. And again, at HCOG and with our consultant Smith Group, we're going to be working on helping with the outreach and the messaging for our local agencies for those projects that will be popping up in Fortuna, in Ferndale, in Arcata, and in Eureka. And lastly, as a reminder, of course, we just talked about the RTP. That'll come back as a final draft in February. That'll be the RTP and an amendment or an addendum to the EIR that was originally approved in 2018, I believe, or 2014. And then lastly, just to keep the board aware, and I'm sure folks saw this, insofar as our RENA process, so we did have a final adopted decision on the final draft RENA preferred alternative for allocating units regionally. We submitted those to HCD. We are currently in our 60-day review period for HCD. I did want to make the board aware we did formally receive today an appeal from the city of Eureka for the board's decision on the RENA process. We are working with HCD staff. It is our understanding right now that they need to complete their review before we do anything, considering the appeal or bringing that back to the board. But just really, again, wanted to make the board aware and know that we'll be talking about that as early as February potentially, but maybe in March. So that's all I have to report.
All right. Thank you. And Caltrans reports.
The Indianola interchange continues to move forward. There's no significant updates from last meeting, just upcoming construction activities, including the installation of the traffic signal at Jacobs Avenue, completing the southbound ramp construction, removal of medium crossings at Indianola, connection to Bay Trail, and reopening the Indianola cutoff in both road in both directions. Work still planned for completion by the end of this summer. There was a Caltrans milestone package in your agenda, and This contains a list of all the Caltrans projects, and this one included the project initiation document work plan, the milestone report with the list of Caltrans projects, and a project map. And as part of the quarter package, we're piloting a new feature, and it is a link to a project communication form. So you'll see that on the first page and the map. And this is a new tool that is available to you as a board member representing a local agency to use if you would like to become more involved in Caltrans project or projects listed in the milestone package. So you would click on that link and it would take you to a smart sheet intake form, and you would enter information about the project that you're interested in. And you would need to do one form for each project that you would be interested in. You'd be given 4 choices for how your agency would like to be involved, with a spectrum ranging from just receiving information all the way to being heavily involved in decision making. You can also request a presentation of a certain project, and we would work with Brendan to see if that's appropriate and determine if we could have a presentation at a future meeting. So once the form has been submitted, someone from Caltrans will follow up with you within 2 weeks. And it's a pilot program, so we're in discovery phase to see if it works. So always looking for feedback on how you like it. And if we would like a demonstration or, walk through it with more information, we could do that at a future meeting if there's interest. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Supervisor Madrone has it.
I have to say that an unanticipated positive thing happened, when driving over the Indianola overpass. The views are magnificent, who would think just getting 30 feet further up in the air, you'd have these magnificent views of the bay and the surroundings. I hadn't anticipated that, and it is awesome. So I'll pass that on to your team, because what a wonderful thing it is.
Okay, any other comments or questions for Caltrans? Okay, any other board member reports? Well, I think we've come to the...
I just wanted to say that last weekend, my son and I rode out to Arcata on the Bay Trail, and the new signs are up, the distance signs. And it's just such a pleasant thing. It was such a beautiful day, and there were so many families and people. It's just wonderful to see our community out there getting fit and being happy and enjoying the beauty around us. But the signs are really great, so thanks. That's all.
That's awesome.
I saw your photos on social media. They were great.
Thank you. It's 18. Boom, Burgell.
No, I've noticed that from a different angle going over the Samoa Bridge when you get up and you can look out and see. But now you can get it from 2 vantage points in the same day. So, all right. Well, if there's no other comments or questions, we will adjourn. Thank you.